asparagus makes you trans. No, I'm just kidding, that's not true. But imagine if it was. What if a scientific study came out tomorrow that demonstrated a statistically significant link between asparagus consumption and having an offspring who identifies as an LGBTQIA person? Just for a moment, suspend disbelief and pretend that for whatever biochemical reason, the more asparagus you eat, the more likely your kid is going to be trans. It would explain all the Western mass queers. In that scenario, what do you think would happen? Maybe in some other reality, it would be a chance for a nationwide conversation about why we let biology have so much influence over our lives. We could collectively recognize the absurd nature of existence, the fact that we're all just meat machines running off biochemistry and vibes. We could hold hands and embrace the cosmic perspective that we are all one, sharing 99% of the same DNA, and we could laugh at how silly it is that we arbitrarily place ourselves into categories based on skin color and endocrine system composition. It would be nice. Unfortunately, we don't live in that reality. You would probably see a Tucker Carlson segment all about how asparagus makes you trans, Facebook posts urging parents to avoid the devil's green bean, and accusations of grooming for those defiantly cooking the vegetable on name. Genocidal maniacs claiming, aha, proof that being trans is a mental illness, and calling for a swift ban on all asparagus growth in the United States. Now that might sound crazy to some of you, but if, like me, you're an unwilling participant in the modern infrastructure of transphobic hate we call the media, then you know that's exactly what would happen. And that was just a silly example that I made up to demonstrate the absurd and violent nature of our modern politics. But let's say it was a different study. What if the supposed source of transness was somehow found to be thyroid medication, artificial breast milk, natural breast milk, birth control, certain kinds of abortion pill? I'll tell you what if, there'd be blood in the streets. To be perfectly clear, no link has been found between any of these things and human sexuality or gender identity. But I could easily see a study coming out in some low-impact journal trying to connect LGBTQ identity with one of these drugs. The study wouldn't even necessarily need to be biochemical in nature. Maybe some confounding variable exists, like liberal women being more likely to take birth control for a few years before having a kid, and the kids of that mother being more likely to come out, as opposed to conservative mothers who resign themselves to their fate as being breeding stock from an early age, and their kids being less likely to come out to them because they're conservative. That data would suggest that there's some sort of link between taking birth control and having queer kids, even though correlation does not equal causation. I can see it now. Headlines reading, birth control makes your kids gay. A whole new wave of gay panic followed by a swift ban on all products containing estrogen, progesterone, and screw it, why not Plan B too, just to be safe. Trans women left unable to get hormones, people assigned female at birth being unable to prevent pregnancy and slipping back to a pre-1800s societal status. All because of that same transphobic right-wing media infrastructure that profits off division and appeals to fascism. Western science has been the justification for bigotry for as long as it's existed. Here in America, biologists invented race science to justify the mental superiority of white people, the physical superiority of black people, and the savagery of indigenous people to justify enslaving and killing the latter. They also made up concepts like hysteria to claim that men were stronger and more logical and thus should be able to own property and land, and women were weaker and more emotional and thus were perfect for homemaking and child rearing. For white women, that is. Black women weren't characterized as weak or demure. They were characterized as masculine and hypersexual so that they could stay in the field and be treated as breeding stock. Remember when this video was about asparagus? And for years now, people have been trying to find a Y for queer people. In the 90s, it was trying to find the gay gene. Today, it's trying to use brain scans to say that trans people are the gender they say they are. Do you really think people were trying to find a gay gene just out of scientific curiosity? Of course not. They were trying to find a way to eradicate queerness. The pursuit of a Y for queer people is the pursuit of a method to destroy queer people. It's fascism dressed in a lab coat. So am I here to tell you to stop asking questions and blindly accept trans ideology? Not at all. I have a PhD in chemical engineering, which I will not shut up about. I value rational thought and legitimate scientific inquiry. I spent 4 years trying to figure out how to get nanoparticles from being pointed like this to being pointed like this. Anyone who thinks that critical thinking or using the scientific method means investigating every possible line of inquiry and following the science wherever it leads has clearly never spent time in a research lab. Rational thought isn't just investigating every possible rational thought you can have. It requires discernment and refinement and experience. It involves knowing how to ask good questions. I once spent 5 months trying to use UV-sensitive dye to figure out why my nanoparticles weren't being oriented correctly, only to find out that it was the dye that was messing up my process all along. It was a line of inquiry that was time-consuming, messy, and ultimately pointless. I didn't even learn anything other than don't use dyes in the coding, which I wasn't going to do anyway. You can ask the wrong questions. Here's the problem. People who aren't politically activated think that merely because questions are being asked in the public discourse, that means that they are worthy questions of being asked. People often don't recognize that questions can be asked in such a way that misdirects your attention, getting you to pay attention to different details or make assumptions that you didn't mean to make in the first place. I'm not racist. I'm just asking, if Black people don't want to be shot by police, why don't they just stop committing crimes? I'm not a misogynist. I'm just wondering, if women are so miserable going to work, why don't we just revert back to a time when women couldn't work our own property or money? I'm not anti-Semitic. I'm just inquiring about the overrepresentation of Jews in media and banking. I'm not Islamophobic. I'm just pointing out the fact that a lot of Muslim countries hate gay people. All of these supposed lines of inquiry were designed to misdirect us from the actual problems at hand, or simply disguise hate speech as critical thinking. Take it from a scientist. Some questions need to be dissolved rather than resolved. Why can't you just define woman? What does it mean to be a woman? What does it mean to be a man? Why are some people trans? What causes people to be transgender or cisgender? Is there a genetic reason? Is there some root cause that we can single out for why some people like the gender they were assigned at birth and others don't? I don't think these questions will or can ever be answered. Thousands of academic scholars have been working overtime for decades trying to figure out a concise explanation for gender, and they still haven't cracked it. So what chance does a STEM major like me have? Even among the trans community, we're deeply divided on these questions. So much for trans ideology. I have my own answers, which I'll happily discuss with you if you pay me $50, but I don't think I can sway a massive audience to think differently about something as deeply personal and culturally specific as gender. In fact, I think these questions were deliberately designed to keep us arguing about pointless metaphysics and gender war bullshit instead of confronting the material reality of women and trans people. Masculinity is in crisis. Give me a break. That implies a time when masculinity was stable. Masculinity is inherently fragile. It's baked into the design of cis-heteropatriarchy. Is this what you people want? You want me to put on makeup and a nice outfit and explain systemic marginalization to you? I don't. I'm exhausted. I don't want to talk about gender on the internet anymore. Oh, that's a good video title. More specifically, I don't want to spend my precious time on this earth convincing cis people that trans people are the gender that they say they are. I definitely don't want to spend my time trying to convince cis people that trans people are in a genocide. Again, for white trans people, everyone else was in a genocide long before 2023, and even before 2020, if you can believe it. We're long past the discussion phase. We're long past the visibility protest phase. We're in the brick-throwing phase. The build better worlds outside of the system phase. That has to be our starting point here. If you can't get on board with that simple fact, unfollow me now. Believe whatever the hell you want about trans people. Maybe an angel showed up drunk to work one morning and accidentally swapped my soul with someone else's when they were putting it in my body. Maybe I was a really bad person in a past life, and so Zeus split my mortal soul into my masculine and feminine halves and punished me to spend a lifetime trying to reconcile the two. Maybe I was a really good person in a past life, and the universe blessed me with the knowledge and wisdom of a trans woman. Or maybe my mom just ate a lot of fucking asparagus when she was pregnant with me. Who fucking cares? I no longer give a shit about how you incorporate trans people into your personal understanding of gender, as long as you're trying to include us. Stop asking why trans people exist and start asking why transphobia exists. Stop asking why trans people exist and start asking why so many of us have eating disorders, are suicidal, are unemployed, or get murdered with zero media coverage. Stop asking why trans people exist and start asking how you can fucking help us. Please.
My community dies every day, whether it's from HIV and AIDS or from transphobia or homophobia. I ask you, consider this. That is a human being. We're all human beings. It's about inclusivity, and I will never, ever ask any of you for respect. I will demand it. You will not tell me that you accept me. You will not tell me that you tolerate me. That is not your power. I take that from you. You will respect me for who I am.